when we talk from the perspective of structural and functional unit of biosphere, so that is ecosystem. So you remember this one. So very simple things. So what is ecosystem? Okay. So why we are calling it as a basic structural and functional unit means we will try to study about entire biosphere taking ecosystem as a reference point. Because if we talk from the lower levels of organization, let's say individual or organism or population or let's say biotic community, it will be pertaining to either a particular individual or a particular species or some organisms. Like let's say a living organism is one individual, or population, it's a group of individuals belonging to same species, and biotic community, a group of populations in a particular area. So that is nothing but biotic community. So they won't serve as a proper parameter to study the entire biosphere. Whereas if we talk from ecosystem, ecosystem is an assemblage of various biotic communities. And again, the biotic communities means it can be the pond, it can be the lake. So various communities related to various things can be there at one place. So that assemblage of biotic communities refers to ecosystem. And here what will happen in ecosystem, we can systematically study the interactions of living organisms with each other as well as with their physical environment. So that's why ecosystem is considered as basic structural and functional unit of biosphere. So you remember this one. Now, can you give any example for any ecosystem that you know? Good. Terrestrial ecosystem. Can you name any terrestrial ecosystems again? Yes, terrestrial ecosystems. Any terrestrial ecosystem? Yes, desert ecosystem, forest ecosystem, or grassland ecosystem. So they are all terrestrial ecosystems. And can you name any aquatic ecosystems? Yes, marine. Yes. So good. So marine ecosystem or lake ecosystem or pond ecosystem, they are aquatic ecosystems. Okay. So likewise. So here when we talk about ecosystems, there can be different types of ecosystems, like we were talking about these examples. Now, there would be a particular place where, let us say, this is this patch of land is, let us assume that this as a grassland. Okay, so you assume as if. And then if you talk from the other side, if you take it like, okay, we'll take this as desert. So desert as an ecosystem, and let us assume that there is another ecosystem which is called, let's say, forest ecosystem. Forest ecosystem. And can you see the intersection portion where the desert ecosystem is getting merged with the forest ecosystem? So the such kind of intersection zone where two ecosystems will zone of overlapping is nothing but one another key term called as ecotone. So ecotone is nothing but the adjacent portion of the two ecosystems where two ecosystems will overlap. Okay, and if we talk from ecotone perspective, it is a zone of junction between two or more ecosystems. And in ecotones, usually certain or specific species will prevail and their abundance would be more. So those species whose abundance would be more in ecotone, they would be known as edge species. Edge species. Okay, that means those species which lives in ecotone zone, they are nothing but edge species. Okay, and why we are calling it as edge species? Now you just remember like this. Now this is one ecosystem, desert ecosystem, and these species are living at the edge of one particular ecosystem, and you consider from this perspective forest ecosystem. So these species of organisms which are living here, they are at the edge of this particular ecosystem. So we will call that kind of species as sorry, edge species. Okay, so that is one thing. So if we talk from the ecotone in between forest ecosystem and desert ecosystem, so grassland is one such example. Grassland ecosystem, grassland is one ecotone between desert and forest ecosystem, likewise. So you have to remember such kind of examples. Okay, and if you look in this particular region, what will happen? The tendency of biodiversity, tendency of increased frequency of certain organisms would be more in the ecotone region. Okay, such an effect where we can see increased tendency of presence of organisms in a particular place in the ecotone region is nothing but edge effect. Okay, so that is known as edge effect. Is that clear? So in this species, organisms from this ecosystem, let's say desert ecosystem as well as forest ecosystem, will flourish in ecotone region. So we can have increased biodiversity, increased frequency of occurrence of animals, or more number of diverse number of organisms can be found in this area. So that is ecotone. So such kind of effect is known as edge effect. So these are some of the concepts related to ecosystems and ecotone, edge species and edge effect. Okay. Now, can you name any other ecotones? Now grassland is an ecotone between desert ecosystem and forest ecosystem. Likewise, can you name any other ecosystems, ecotones? Wetlands? Yes, mangrove. Mangroves is one example. So mangrove is ecotone between which ecosystems? Yes, it is terrestrial as well as marine ecosystems. Terrestrial ecosystem, marine ecosystem. And then what about the marshlands? Like one student was talking about wetlands. So instead, if we take it as marshland, marshland is an ecosystem, ecotone between dry ecosystem as well as wet ecosystem. We can consider likewise. And if we talk from estuaries, have you heard about estuaries? So estuaries is
between fresh water
good.
and
Yes. Yes. Good. So estuaries are between marine water as well as the fresh water. So estuary is a place where river joins with the sea. So ocean. So likewise. So here, when you see some of the examples, you can remember like this. So have a look here. So now here, marshland. Marshland is an ecotone between dry ecosystem as well as wet ecosystem. So we can have wetlands, all those things like marshlands or marshy or swampy areas. Okay, so that is one thing. Now, you see here mangroves. Mangroves is an ecotone between terrestrial ecosystems and marine ecosystems. That is one another thing you have to remember. And then you see grasslands. So grassland is an ecotone between desert ecosystem and forest ecosystem. That means it's an intermediary place where if rainfall is sufficient, so then it turns into forest ecosystem. If rainfall is deficient, then it turns into desert ecosystem. If rainfall is intermediary, then that ecosystem will develop into grasslands. But the place where these two meets, at that place we can have an ecotone. So that is grassland. Is that clear? So that is one thing. Then estuaries, the place where the fresh water and river water meets with ocean likewise. So estuaries is an ecotone between freshwater ecosystem and the marine water ecosystem or salt water likewise. So remember that one. And there we were talking about some edge species. Okay, So just, can you name any edge species?
Birds,
Yes.
agriculture,
Yes. Think which kind of animals or which kind of birds or you can see in these areas. So then you will get the answer. For example, in grasslands, can't you see elephants? Can't you see elephants? Can't you see giraffes likewise? So such species in grassland are nothing but the edge species. Okay, so it can be elephant, it can be deers, it can be elks, etc. So some birds also serve as the uh, edge species in wetland areas. Okay, in wetland areas, yes, in the mangrove areas you can see crocodiles. So those species which prevail in these ecotones are nothing but edge species. Okay, so you think likewise and you try to answer likewise. Okay.